Hi, it's Kim here, and want to share some tips on how to deal with frustration and anger. So, I would be lying if I said that sometimes I don't get frustrated with our current situation. And I was triggered just now going into a shop, and even though I have a mask exemption, they said, well, you can't come in unless you wear a mask. And that triggered some frustration in me. And so even though I got frustrated and then I dealt with it, I went away and I thought, okay, you need to look deeper at this, Kim, and you need to look at what is the pattern playing behind the anger, because it is a pattern, and let's deal with it. And what I want to really share to start with is some helpful tips on how to manage frustration and anger from in an easy way. And as with all emotions, the first thing that we need to do is to acknowledge how we're feeling, because often we don't. And especially with anger, and especially for women getting angry, it's not considered okay or kosher to be angry often. So the first thing that we need to do with any emotion is acknowledge it without any self-judgment or self-recrimination. That is the first thing that we need to do. Because one of the things that emotions want is to be validated and recognized and acknowledged, and most people are not doing that. So the very first step is simply awareness and non-judgmental, compassionate acknowledgement. And even just doing that will help to lessen the emotion. Now, the interesting thing about anger is it's what I call a sweet or a lolly type of emotion. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is that anger is like the wrapper around a lolly, and the lolly that sits inside the wrapper is another emotion. Because anger is a protective emotion. Just like a lion will protect its cubs if it feels it's under threat, or the cubs are under threat, it will get angry. And that is what we do when we feel under threat. We can get angry. And often that will be due to either some sort of fear. It's a fear response being covered over with anger. For example, if somebody nearly runs you over on the street, that triggers fear inside the body, but it also can trigger anger. But it also can be other emotions such as hurt or sadness, but in particular hurt. And one of the things that can really trigger a pattern of anger is if we feel disrespected. So as I was exploring my anger response today, because it was my reaction, I could see that it had its roots in being disrespected and invalidated as a child. And it was re-triggering that as I went into the shop today. I felt disregarded, disrespected, invalidated. My point of view was not being honoured and respected, and I had no choice. So also we can feel quite angry when we feel controlled, and this ties into being abused. If we're bullied or abused or controlled, we're going to feel angry because that is a natural protective mechanism from the body to try and protect us. So let's look at some solutions. Well, as I've mentioned, and this is deeper work, we can track back to the roots of our pattern and clear those deeper patterns in the unconscious, and that's literally like pulling the roots out. But we also need to deal with the leaves above the ground, which is the reaction that we have. And we can do certain things in the moment to help us deal with that anger. And one really useful thing is to breathe deeply. It's very simple, and it may sound too simple, but when we breathe deeply, because breathing is the metal element in Chinese medicine and anger is the wood element, metal chops wood. So if we breathe deeply, we can breathe through some of the anger response. The other thing that we can do is to once we've identified and recognized and acknowledged that we're feeling angry, is that we can just simply say to ourselves, this anger is welcome, I acknowledge this anger. And again, we breathe deeply, but it's useful to do this little welcoming exercise with our eyes closed, because then we feel like we're validated and we're validating ourselves, and that can help to appease the anger. And then what's really useful is to identify what is the feeling beneath the anger, because usually there will be an emotion beneath the anger, because the anger is just a protective emotion. For example, there may be some fear, or maybe some upset, some other emotion. And once we've identified that emotion, then we can look at dealing with that emotion. So say, for example, it's hurt, then again we can say to ourselves, this hurt is welcome, I acknowledge this hurt. And we give ourselves permission to feel the hurt. And we may need to shed a tear or two to let that energy dissipate. But it's just so important to know how to deal with our emotions in a practical, tangible way, because if we can do that, then the energy just dissipates rather than staying stuck inside or building up. And if we hold anger in, it's a very, very powerful emotion. It's a very toxic emotion, and it relates with the liver, and it's stored in the liver, and it affects the liver. It affects the functioning of the liver. So for example, a lot of people with gallbladder issues, because the gallbladder and the liver are a paired organ, the reason that they actually have the gallbladder issues is because they have a lot of stored frustration and resentment and anger, and that blocks the Chi channels, the liver meridian channels in the body, so that as the energetic channels are blocked, it means that the physical organ can't work properly. It stops working as well as it should. So our emotions literally have an effect on our tissues and organs, and this is why we eventually create illness. It's because we have a backlog of emotions and stress inside our body. So I hope these little tips on how to deal with anger are useful. Certainly keeps me sane, and look forward to seeing you in another video.